This was the moment when officers found Marvin Morales lying unresponsive on the floor of a station bathroom. A California sheriff's deputy who just overdosed on cocaine he'd stolen from people he arrested, which later tested positive for fentanyl. Deputies had to rush in and administer Narcan to revive him, and he was fired soon afterward. But on December 2nd, 2025, Morales resurfaced in the most horrific way imaginable. That morning, he stabbed his 11-year-old son multiple times inside their own home, while the boy's 6-year-old sister hid nearby, too terrified to move. Deputies who arrived described blood pooled near the entryway, and signs the boy had tried to crawl toward the front door. Morales fled before anyone could reach him, leading to a pursuit down Interstate 5 that ended when spike strips shredded his tires. As the car crashed to a stop, he reportedly drew a weapon, forcing officers who had worked with him in the past to shoot him. Morales died hours later at the hospital, while the sheriff called the crime one of the most devastating his department had ever encountered. Morbid Facts, Part 830. In 1966, 17-year-old Franca Viola became the center of one of Italy's most disturbing criminal traditions, the matrimonio reparatore, a so-called rehabilitating marriage, where a rapist could escape prosecution by marrying his victim. Franca was kidnapped by Filippo Melodia and held captive for 8 days, during which she was repeatedly assaulted as Melodia and his accomplices tried to force her into the marriage that would legally erase his crimes. But Franca did something that no woman in Italy had ever done before. She said no. Her refusal didn't just defy her attacker, it defied the entire legal system, the cultural norms of her town, and the centuries-old belief that a woman's honor could be restored by marrying the man who raped her. When Franca and her family pressed charges instead, the community turned on them. Their property was burned, they were publicly shamed, and they lived under constant threats for refusing to participate in the ritual that protected rapists. Melodia was eventually convicted of kidnapping, rape, and intimidation, but the law that allowed rapists to walk free by marrying their victims remained in place for another 15 years. Article 544, the clause that effectively turned sexual assault into a negotiable family arrangement, was finally repealed in 1981. Morbid Facts, Part 829. Russian fitness influencer Dmitry Nuyanzin has died after collapsing during a workout, and investigators say his body had been pushed to the absolute breaking point. The 32-year-old had recently been filming a 10,000-calorie bulking challenge while still cutting water for photo shoots and reportedly cycling stimulants and anabolic agents. Friends said he'd been complaining of dizziness and chest pain but kept training to keep up the content. When he collapsed at the gym, doctors couldn't revive him, and the autopsy showed his heart was severely enlarged and overloaded, more like that of a much older man. Experts concluded he suffered sudden cardiac failure triggered by a perfect storm of extreme overeating, chemical strain, dehydration, and relentless overtraining. Nicholas Kunzelman and Stephanie Hart-Grizel survived the Columbine shooting in 1999, only to be mysteriously murdered less than a year later. On February 13, 2000, Stephanie went to visit Nicholas while he was closing the Subway restaurant just a mile from their high school. Hours later, an off-duty employee noticed the lights still on, walked in, and saw an unknown young man leaving. Inside, he found both Columbine teens shot to death behind the counter. Nothing was stolen, so it wasn't a robbery, and the witness gave a detailed description of the suspect, but he was never found. Investigators later uncovered a drug ring operation out of that Subway, but there was no link to the teens. To this day, the killer has never been identified.